Dialogues, and welcome to Book 101. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. He's the author of his TV novels, no other than Mr. Kalimaxos.
Hello, Daniel.
Hello, Mr. Kelly, and welcome back.
Good to be here.
Yes, and another week, another book to discuss.
It sure is.
So, before we go on to our usual discussion, let's do the recap of the books that we talk about.
Yes. The first book we discussed on the first week was a book called My Decision. It's a single book about a wife whose husband was no longer interested in her sexually and what she had to do about it. The second week, we discussed a book series, 8 books in total, called Jane's Diaries. Uh, it's a story of a man who, after his wife dies, he finds her diaries, and they basically tell him that um, his wife in the diaries was a totally different person than the wife he knew all the years he was married to her. So then we move on to week number 3 with the book series called My Husband's Boss. That's a 6 book series. And it is about a couple in the 2009 recession that had financial problems, and they came up with a deal that a proposal to his boss that for an exchange for a promotion and a big pay raise, um, the wife of the man was going to become the boss's mistress, and that's the story of that. um, then on week 4, we did the book. It's a single book called Size Matters. It's a book about physical differences, size fixation, preferences, physical incompatibility, also infidelity, and uh, the need for someone to get even in some way to get over that. Um, and it's told from a female point of view. Five Week 5 was a book series that is still open called Forbidden Lust. There's 5 books in that so far. Probably will be a sixth. And it is about a couple's journey into all kinds of extramarital sex, um, because, as they put it, our love uh, didn't go stale, just our sex life. So we improved it by bringing others into it. So these people are not just into one thing; they try a whole bunch of different things in the sexual world. Then we have in week 6 we did a single book called Ignore by Omega, and that is my only sci-fi zombie apocalypse romance adventure kind of book, um, uh, about people, normal people, not the president, not anybody big, not doctors or anybody, but normal people stuck in a zombie apocalypse and what happens there. Um, and that leads us to this week, where we're going to talk about the book series. There's 4 books in it already, called Kyle, Hannah, and Ken.
Interesting, Mr. Kelly. So, how did you craft that? Kylie, Hannah, and Ken.
Um, Kyle, Hannah, and Ken is a culmination of uh, experiences and also interviews with people in the lifestyle over the years. Um, uh, just to make it real quick, I got involved in the lifestyle when I was very young. When some some members of my family were involved in it, and my aunt and uncle basically, and I learned what it was, and from just an abstract point of view. Years later, when I was in college, and I had some friends, and they were involved in it, they were interested in it, and I got involved into it more. Um, Fast forward years later, I knew enough and I've known enough about the lifestyle that I can write pretty accurately the the concepts and everything that goes on in it. Having talked to um, the um, the main participants involved in multiple relationships, I last year was made acquaintance of a gentleman who is involved in this lifestyle, and we had extensive conversations, which was really interesting because it had been years since I've been involved in this, but what he was going through in his mind and all that was what it made everything that I knew about the lifestyle come back. And I decided that I should write a book based on his thinking and some of the early experiences of him and his wife. So the first part of this book is pretty much based on his and his wife's dealings prior to them ever doing anything, uh, and also the what goes on in their minds. The book is written from a third person point of view. Unlike most of the books in the genre, which is pretty big in erotica literature, uh, 90% of those books are told from the point of view of the husband. The rest are, if most of them are told from the point of view of the wife, and one or two here and there are told from the point of view of the wife's lover. So what I did here was I wanted to present this story from all three's point of view, as it was happening and what they were thinking as they were doing it, what their motivations were, and all that.
Wow, sounds interesting. So, what behind the title of your book?
The title is very simple. It's the Kyle and Hannah are the married couple, and Ken is the guy that eventually becomes Hannah's lover on the side. It's with some of these stories for me, when it comes to titles, I keep it simple. I don't go too deep. So I left it at that.
Okay, so let's talk about the main characters of the book of your novel.
Okay. Here's the thing. There obviously the three people mentioned in the title are the three main characters. Although there are some others. There's another character who becomes important, and that's Ken's wife, Amber. But she's not introduced. She's mentioned at first and then introduced later on. So um, they are, as is usual in my stories, um, they are very detailed, and their background. There's a lot of background in the first part of this book, the first book in the series. There's a lot of background on Hannah and on Kyle and their story, which starts with the two of them being in college. They're young, they meet each other, they have a relationship, sexual and all that. But then Hannah, being young, decides that uh, it's too early for her to settle, and she also is not that, well, she likes Kyle as a person. Um, Sexually speaking, he's not exactly ringing all the bells. So she ends up having an affair with somebody. And around that time, her parents moved to Florida, and she is not doing good in school because she's young and confused about this and that, where she's headed in life. And she decides to move to Florida. And there she ends up meeting another guy who, while good sexually, he's not exactly a nice person. And eventually, she gets pregnant by him, and he denies that the kid is his. She knows it is, but he denied it, and she realized that that she had to go with her parents and get her degree or finish school and all that. But somewhere along the line, she got lonely and she contacts her old boyfriend Kyle, and they start talking. And over a period of some time, eventually, the two of them um, develop a friendship. She trusts him to tell him everything that happened. There was some other stuff that also happened that basically, when he realized that early on that she was in Florida with another guy, eventually he moved on. Um, but here she is. She comes back into his life, and to make a long story short, they end up rekindling their relationship, and eventually they end up getting married. And he adopts her little daughter. Um, at this point, Hannah realizes that she almost fell off the cliff, that she did stupid things, and she almost ended up being a single mother with nothing, with no education and no way to support herself or nothing. But all of a sudden, she had an opportunity to finish college, to get married to this man, um, who she thinks is a good person. So that's her background. Um, on the other side, her husband is he was hurt by what happened, and he thought that it was basically over between them. And all of a sudden, she gets in touch with him again, and he found that he was still in love with her. So he took her back. Um, but he is find himself fixated on what happened. He had found out that she cheated on him before she left to go to Florida, that she was with another guy and all that. And uh, it took me a while to get this out of this guy, the actual Kyle. But he told me then it didn't take long, like about a year or so. They had a child, and then they had another child after that. And after they were done, they decided that three kids was enough for them. Um, that he started fixating on the men that had been with his wife before they got married, that she had cheated with or she had been with. Um, so, and the fixation became excessive, obsessive. Um, that that he thought about it constantly, and it got worse when he found some picture evidence of what had happened, and that's all he thought about. So that's where the two of them are when he realizes that he's fixating on his wife being with other men. And the reason why I put all this in the story, which I thought was, because I kept asking him, like, what led you to this? How did this develop? I mean, did you just get up one day and all that? And I've known from experience, from talking to some of these guys, that there was always something in all of them that makes the men who are interested in this, they're almost always are have voyeuristic intentions. Watching porn, or even the possibility of watching somebody having sex. Um, and So anyway, so I asked him, and he told me all this. So that's why I kind of included some of this stuff in the story, and why they're that way. Now, um, then there is another character. Obviously, the character is Ken, and this guy is mythical in these people, the real people story that I told you that it's based on. That he doesn't exist in their lives, but he is somebody that I knew when I was younger. A guy who, through my contacts, through that lifestyle, I met him. He had money. He was married to a wealthy woman. Um, and the two of them were very sexual people, had an open marriage. And one of the things he liked to do, that it was his big thing, was to have sex with married women with the permission of their husbands. um and that's part of the whole wife sharing thing. And when I met him, we had some quite interesting conversations, because at the time, mind you, I was in my early 20s. I was what some people would call a male escort. um, Life is expensive in New York, and even though I had a job, I liked the good life and having fun. And an apartment in Manhattan is very expensive. Um, so when someone told me that there was an opportunity to do that kind of work, I figured, why not? I like sex, and this is an opportunity, and um, so I jumped in on it. But I was really a novice in that world that he was in. I mean, I dabbled in it a couple of times, but I didn't understand it. I Even though my aunt and my uncle had done it, this guy kind of like took me under his wing and became sort of like a friend and confidant. And we talked about people that we knew and things we did. And his the character of Ken is kind of based on him. How this guy was in his early 40s, he had done it for like about 15 years. So he was quite familiar. He also had about 4 or 5 couples at any one time that he was involved with in this type of relationship. And so his character is based on a real person, not 100%, but close to it. The attitude, the way that eventually when he meets Kyle, and Kyle and Ken have this conversation where it's very stark. There, Ken is basically telling Kyle that he knows. He says to him, "I know you want to share your wife with me, and I want you to know it's going to happen. But I want to define the rules and the conditions that this is going to be done. That everything is going to be consensual. Nothing is going to be hidden. Um, I want your permission. As a matter of fact, I don't cheat. Cheating to me is bad form and disrespectful. My wife always knows when I'm going to be with somebody. She knows that I'm here with you two this weekend. I know who she's with. His wife also has lovers. I know who she's with at the moment. We don't lie to each other, and what we do is out in the open, so there's no cheating. If you and your wife are into that stuff, uh, will you and I are done. I also don't humiliate. I don't believe in humiliating the husband. And that's a key thing because in some of the popular cuckold culture, the books, most of the books that you read online, or books that you can buy on the concept, part of it includes the the wife's lover and sometimes the wife humiliating the husband. Personally, I think that that is a separate kind of kink that I never indulged in. I don't believe in humiliating people. So I think it's classless. So I never indulged in it, and I also don't include it in my books. But so Ken is basically telling him, the how this is going to happen when it happens. Yes, I want to do it. Yes, you get to watch, but no, I'm not going to do this, this, and that. And it's going to be, there'll be nothing violent. Nobody's getting tied up. Nobody, it's all going to be consensual and open. And that's basically the three main people in the story. And as the story progresses, you get to see in each scene pretty much what each of them is thinking at one time. There's like these, their personal thoughts, their motivations, um, be, and that's the important aspect of this book. That it's not just about who did what where, as they call in the trade, as it's called, a stroke book, where there is minimal of story and it's 85% the sex. In my books, there's a little bit more than that. Even during the sex, there's thoughts of these people as to what they're doing and how they're handling it. So that's why it's from a third person point of view and the thinking point of view. And another thing that I like to call the psychosexual genre. These are sexual books, but they're not about like just normal sex, where there's no guilt, there's very little debate as to what you're doing. I mean, single person A with single person B getting together and having sex, uh, unless that they're like really religious or something to that regard, or there's something strange about them. There's no guilt, there is no strenuous mental hurdles that they need to overcome. In psychosexual fiction, there is, because these people have to go outside the normally accepted, socially accepted norms of society. And that's what this is. And this isn't, in my view, these books are usually, most people who write these books, they're they're very dry. They're for all intents and purposes, they're written for men who are into that and already have gone past all the thinking, and all they want to do is they want to read a story about, my wife is having sex with somebody else, and I don't know, maybe masturbate to it or whatever. My books are, there's an actual story. They explain the why, the who, the why these people are the way they are, and what is it that they want to do, what they go through in their mind as they try to grapple with, as they most of some these books are about people on their first time, because once you've done it a few times, um, it's a lot easier. I mean, you've come to terms with who and what you are, both for the wife and the husband and with the lover. They all know their place. Um, it's a triangle where everyone knows their place. Everybody knows what's there and what's going to be done, and it's just a question of getting together and doing it. But the first time, and actually the second time also, because the first one is a shock. But that time period right before the first time, then right after the first time, where these people have to grapple with it mentally, all of that is psychosexual drama.
Very well said, Mr. Kelly. So before we go on, let's shout out to the people listening in Ohio. Thank you for listening to this podcast in Cincinnati. I got 21%, Columbus at 16%, Akron at 11%, Cleveland at 6%, Dayton at 5%, Toledo at 4%, Sponsville, Westlake, Medina, Sydney, Lancaster, Mentor, Beechwood, North Bend, Canton, Sardinia, St. Mary's, Youngstown, Miamisburg, Chesterland, Sandusky, Findlay, Avon, Brownview Heights, Bomberton, Westerville, Zanesville, Belleville, Oryxville, Wapakoneta, Painesville, North Canton, Cleveland Heights, East Liverpool, Fairfield, Dublin, Inglewood, and last but not the least, Portsmouth. Thank you for supporting this podcast, Ohio, because this podcast is created to empower writers all over the world, like Mr. Kalimaxos. So, Mr. Kali, what is the best highlight of Kyle, Hannah, and Ken?
Um, while some would say the second half, where the our threesome gets together in Key West, Florida, and they go on Ken's yacht, and that's when the seduction and fun begins and happens. All the sexual aspect of the story in the book. Um, to me, the most important part is the how they got there, and the mentality. And when the Kyle character, the husband, approaches the wife the first time and tells her that that's what he wants to see. That's what, and she says, "What would you want? Why would you want to see that?" And the thing is that the two of them have been coming to that point in a roundabout way for different reasons. She is sexually dissatisfied. I mean, the poor guy is not cutting the mustard, and she's had better, and she's wondering. She's in her mid 30s, and she's wondering what would it be like with someone else. But she doesn't want to cheat because she doesn't want to take the chance of ruining her life. That's another thing. She's also very driven in business at her work, and she believes that the only thing that is going to keep her from falling off the cliff again is by being in total control of everything, including her marriage, everything that they do. She's basically the boss. So she's a very bossy person. Um, but she would never do anything to ruin all that. She's like, I work hard to get to where I am, to have a family and this and that and everything. So no, I don't want to ruin it. And all of a sudden, the husband comes and tells her, um, you know, I honey, I wouldn't mind seeing you with another guy. So in her mind, it's like she hit the lottery. She basically got her husband to tell her that it's okay for her to do what she's been thinking about doing, but not doing. She thought about the possibility of cheating on him, but now she doesn't have to. Now she has permission, and it takes her a little bit of time before she realizes that and that's the best part for me. Their conversations, how the two of them go back and forth, and they you're wondering who's grooming whom for this. um, but how they get there. Um, Now, eventually, on the other end of the story is when everything happens. Um, and well, going back, so that's basically the most important part for me. The How the couple came to the realization that they were going to do it, that they were in agreement in doing it, because from every person that I've talked to involved in this lifestyle, that is 90% of the stress of them prior to doing anything. It's getting the courage up to talk about it and discussions and conversations. Um, so yeah, that's the best part.
Definitely. So, do you think how many series of this book will be come up?
Uh, I've written four, and there is room for two more at least. Um, the When I had conversations with this gentleman, um, uh, he basically told me which way what the things that they want to do in their bucket list when they get around to doing it. I believe they've started. But anyway, so at first I had told him, listen, I'm going to write this the way that I want. Um, and there's only going to be what I think what I write. And to tell you the truth, I thought this book was going to go to four books and that's going to be it. That was going to be it. But he convinced me that there's at least enough for two more books. And I, I have to schedule them in because I plan ahead for things I want to write. And I'm into the fall already in my plans. And these books were not included. So somewhere along the line, I'm going to have to somehow figure doing a book between now and the end of the year, and then maybe another one at the beginning of next year or something to that effect.
Wow, sounds interesting. Those series, what will be your next project?
Well, I have some other books that are already written. Um, uh, One is a series called it's in the process of being renamed. I'm reworking it. It's a two-book series, and then there's another one that I have already written. It's also two books. It's also in the wife sharing genre, but it's told from the point of view of the woman's lover, or more apt, their mentor. Um, it also kind of has a little bit of um, the background of the original Ken character. He's a mix of the Ken character and some of my experiences. The mentor. I've written two books on it already, and I think that there's room for one more. Um, but the book that I'm writing currently is called Brothers, and it is a book about a woman who's locked in isolation with two brothers during the 6 weeks of lockdown, and the what happened between the three of them, and the after effects. And hopefully, I'm unlike other books that I write the parts individually, post one, and then come back to it like a few months down the road. I'm writing this whole thing all in one shot while my mind is on it. I'm already close to 60,000 words, and it'll probably go even more. And most likely, it'll be either in two or three parts. Um, and when it drops on Amazon, and I might not have it just on Amazon. It might be one of those books that I spread around to other sites. But that's my current work. And I have some other stuff that ideas, a science fiction story, um, uh, or two. Actually, I have like two or three ideas, of which two I really like. So those are my plans for down the road and things that I have still available.
So, Mr. Kali, what are your short term and long term goals in writing?
Short term, believe it or not, is to finish some of this erotica stuff that I've had, and kind of concentrate a little bit on science fiction stories that are not overtly erotic. I mean, there's going to be a little bit in it, but not. substantial. Instead of a third of the story being the erotic, we may drop it down to like 10% or even less, and have more of a story. Um, so that's kind of like where I'm headed a little bit, because the mind goes stale if you keep writing the same thing over and over.
Okay, so Mr. Kali, Kyle, Hannah, and Ken, what do you think the flaws?
Other than the obvious that I apologize for this to the readers, but my last one, after I posted it, I realized that it had not been edited properly. I trusted a gentleman to edit it for me, and while I went over it, I didn't go over it well enough, and he had left some mistakes. So, uh, but as far as the story is concerned, um, I think that I need to expound on one aspect about the type of man that would do this. I've explained what Kyle's reasoning is, but I kind of need to, maybe I have in a way roundabout here and there, but basically the type of man, the one word that defines or these husbands who do this is provider. These are men who see themselves as, they have a woman that they love, and they believe that it's their job to provide for them in every way possible. Um, she's a mother of my children, my mate, my spouse. I'm supposed to do all this for her. And in the process of finding that they're not, and it kind of goes hand in hand with their proclivity of voyeurism, and their kink of seeing her with another man. They built this thing in their head that it's their job to provide the opportunity for her to have her fun that an average husband would not. So when the psychological thinking of these men is that that's their motivation, and I that's one of the things that I wanted. Like in the last two books of Kyle, Hannah, and Ken, I want to get that across. And as I usually do with these things, it's probably going to be some conversation. Um, and while most of his poignant conversations have been with his wife's lover, Ken, I want to do a conversation with him with the lover's wife, Amber, who, knowing her husband now, for they've been married for like 20 some years, um, she knows what makes him tick, and she understands the concept of how this works, and she draws him out of him. She has this, it's a conversation I've been planning on having her do, but in it I want to include his thinking as to why he wants this done, what compels them to do this. And this is one of the things that is kind of missing in a lot of these stories. I think I've said this before, where a lot of them are basically very dry. They're two-dimensional sexually, like who did what to whom, and a bare minimum was the why, and how did it all happen. And that's one of the aspects that I think that I could have done a little bit better. Yeah, I've touched it, but I haven't gone into it exactly as I should have.
Yes, very well said, Mr. Kali. So before we go on, I'm inviting you to listen to my other podcast, Food 101, on our third season with Chef Alessandro, one of the best executive chef in one of the best five-star hotel in downtown Toronto. Plus one more, please do listen to our first episode of our new podcast, Comedy 101, with Mr. Mike Lucas. Comedy 101 is to empower comedians all over the world and to give you laughter, people. So please support Comedy 101. Will be tomorrow will be our first episode. So, Mr. Kali, can you please invite our listeners to buy all your books?
My books are different than many other writers in my genre, in that instead of just having most of the story being erotica, they fall under erotica, but they're more than that. Um, you get the sex part, but you also get a story developed that fits the situation, explains the situation, and it does it through development. Um, the people are not, um, you know, tropes. They're human beings. You get to have a feel for them and understand them, and what's going on. Um, and that, in my view, is the key aspect that makes my work different than other people who basically just write sex books. Um, so if you are interested in not just the sex, but you also want a good story, um, some of which are told from a woman's point of view, some from a man's, but they, or from a third person, where you get everybody's thinking and mentality. You get what I was saying earlier is a genre called psychosexual fiction, where what these people are doing is out of the norm, and it they have hurdles to overcome, mental hurdles to overcome, um, that when we think about them, they're stressful. So it's not just sex stories; it's also people stories, and the things that these people go through to do what they do, and after they decide that they're going to go there, whatever the sexual lifestyle it is that they end up doing, and that's what, characters. Good characters are what make a good story, and then a story that matches the characters, so that when you're reading the story you say, oh yeah, I can see that happening, as opposed to, when you're watching a TV show and you see something that is badly written and you say, no way would that guy do that. I think about that when I'm writing my stories. I don't want you to do that. I want you to say, you know oh my god, that's, no, you are going to say, oh my god, because it's what they do is off the beaten path, but but the characters match the story.
Okay, people, let's support Mr. Kali because the books are one of a kind in a steamy genre. So, Mr. Kali, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Daniel. It was a pleasure to be here.
Morrigan, people, see you soon.